Thank you very much for the enthusiastic clapping. I haven't actually done anything yet, but you know what, I'll take it. A very, very warm welcome to our audience, this brilliant amount of people here at the Square in Brussels, and of course those of you who are joining us online for this 60-minute closing ceremony of a most sparkling 20th European Week of Regions and Cities. Now, in 2 decades, the European Week of Regions and Cities really has grown to become a very, very unique communication and networking platform. And as you all know, it brings together regions and cities from all over Europe. There's the side which really is the promotion of policy learning, but something that Europe does, I think, very, very well, which is the exchange of good practice. A reminder for you all, we do have interpretation in German, French and English, and we have velotype in English. You're of course welcome to tweet, #EURegionsWeek. Has anyone tweeted already this week? Has anyone actually done it? Okay, we had a few, yeah, you sound like you're down the pub, and we have a raised hand, so thank you so very, very much. My name is Katrina Sickle, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of closing up this week in the company of 3 fabulous speakers, and I'm going to invite them now one by one to the stage. So can I please ask to join me first, of course, the EU Commissioner for Cohesion and Reforms, Elisa Ferreira. A very warm welcome to you. Thank you very, very much. Let me give you the opportunity so you don't just have to sit there and smile to say a few words of welcome, if you like.
Well, what could I say? I think it was a very, very intensive week, but I think it was incredibly important and incredibly interesting. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for being online. And above all, thank you very much for your everyday work, because that's what matters. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we have next the President of the European Committee of the Regions, Vasco Cordeiro. Please, a very warm welcome for this gentleman. You see, you all get a lovely little jingle to come on stage, don't you? It's nice, it's nice. You did a good walk there, can I just say.
I've practiced a lot.
Have you?
At home with a jingle.
Okay, very nice. I'm very pleased. In front of a mirror, I hope. Please, a couple of words just to open.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here after this exciting week where so much was debated and so many people contributed to foster the cause of regions and cities in Europe. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is an important cause. It's something very close to my heart as a European citizen. It's something that I think is critically important. And obviously, we're going to dive more into the details of why cohesion policy really is the glue. I think I'm quoting the Commissioner there in the course of this closing session. But first, we're going to hear from our third expert, our guest speaker, and that is, of course, the chair of the REGI committee. It's MEP Yunus Omarjee. So a very, very warm welcome to him. You get to be closest to me, you see. You see, the privileged position, you're closest to where I am. So let me just give you the opportunity to say hello to these good people.
C'était une semaine très enthousiasmante.
This was a week full of enthusiasm, starting in the European Parliament with the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. And in order to be in direct touch with European citizens, with those who implement cohesion policy, who make it, I'm very pleased to be here.
And may I just say again, and I forgot to say, it is still a novelty to have actual people on an actual stage in an actual place. So I'm always grateful for that. And I didn't ask, I should remind you, please check your phones are on silent. We are still in those early days of physical events. Right. Hold those thoughts for a moment, if you may, because before we plunge into the meat of this final session, I just have a few facts and stats that are hot off the press, so to speak, and they capture what's been going on in the last few days. So a reminder for you, around 300 sessions took place, so that's absolutely fabulous, and there were almost 20,000 registered participants online and also at physical participation. So that is brilliant. Something else, just to flag up, additional efforts were made on the part of the organisers and the partners to minimise the event's environmental impact. So thank you so much for everybody who was a part of that, whether you opted to use environmentally friendly materials or solutions to ensure that this could be a paperless event. And just a reminder, in fact, building on last year's actions, when 145 trees were planted in Portugal, the CO2 emissions of the data used for the events platform will also be offset. And something very, again, there's lots of things close to my heart, the food. All the food that doesn't get eaten here, that's critically important, does actually get distributed. So there you go. Now, in case you did not manage to catch all of the moving parts of this year's edition, the activities during the week all addressed new challenges for Europe's cohesion through 4 main themes: green transition, digital transition, territorial cohesion, and youth empowerment. And so we have structured this closing session around those themes, and each of those themes, as these good people know, is structured around a headline video which captures some of those highlights of the week. But first, our opening video highlights perhaps a less well-known function of the role of cohesion policy in responding to challenges through crisis management. So I think all of you would perceive cohesion policy as a major public investment policy, but it has really become an efficient instrument of crisis response for member states. And so with that in mind, this year's edition of the week offered sessions that explored the role of cohesion policy in responding to the various challenges emerging at every level, European, regional, international, local, due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's important, and the Commissioner, I'm sure, will agree with me, but we will hear from her after the video, without cohesion policy, the last more than 2 years would have been even tougher for EU territories than they are already, and it has already been. So what I'm going to do first is let's remind ourselves of what's been taking place in the week when we look at crisis management.
I would like to start by wishing that this was a happier day. It is a sad day, but our grief must move to a determination to do more.
Actually, nowadays there are a lot of people that are very worried, especially with inflation and the energy crisis and the situation in Ukraine.
People just simply do not have the money, and all those things that should enable green transition are still extremely expensive.
All of these technologies are also involving a super consumption.
This crisis could change the standard of living for all Europeans, so Europe needs to act now.
L'Europe peut mourir par manque de solidarité et par déficit de cohésion.
However, there is a danger. Emergency management should not become the new normal for cohesion policy. This must be clear because a lot of regions are lagging behind.
The times we are living are very, very, very challenging concerning this issue.
The hearts of people are immense. The pockets sometimes are not as big as the hearts. This was the sense of urgency. Yeah. And if we had not done it, regional problems or the imbalances would have broken Europe. Tell people what you have done, because some people just don't know. And I want to thank all of you. We have a lot of interference, and we have got to be strong and to be intelligent, keeping the dynamics, keeping the cohesion going. And I think we'll do it because we are together.
So, doesn't need me to tell you or anyone that these crises are dramatically shaping, have dramatically shaped the daily lives of us all, and we saw you there right in the midst of it. I think you were in Poland, were you not, earlier this year? This is where we saw you. So just give a few thoughts perhaps on how cohesion policy has stepped up and stepped in. How did you see it growing in stature as a key instrument of support in these times?
Well, in fact, it was really a shock and it is still a shock to see war in Europe, in our borders, to see Russia invading a country, and to see the cost, the damage, the pain that is imposed on normal citizens. So what we did with cohesion policy, and everybody knows it, is to change, with support of the European Parliament, support of the Council, a positive impulse from the Committee of Regions, to change the legislation and to be able to support those that welcome these citizens, because they come, and I was there in the border of Poland. I was there with Mr. Omarjee, and it was freezing cold, although for them it was already moderate, the temperature. But we could see these people coming with children, with pets, dogs, cats, elderly people, parents or grandparents, and crossing the border, and then poor citizens, poor people, changing all their lives to be able to welcome them, to integrate them, to help them. And so it's our duty also to use the money that is still available to stand by them and to help them to address these emergencies. That's what was done. It was a solidarity movement in a period of crisis, and that's also what we are here for.
Thank you very much. And you know, if I turn to you, Mr. Cordeiro, I mean, since the very beginning, Europe has been very much in the spotlight. Eyes have been on Europe to see what is that response. And the Commissioner has touched, particularly in funding, but more than that, the fact you were there. You know, there was a presence there. What would you like to add here?
Well, first, I think it's important to stress the proactivity that the European Commission, and namely through Commissioner Elisa Ferreira, had in providing the answers, of course, in a work that was done not only by the European Commission, with the European Parliament too, and a lot of institutions, the Council, to provide the tools that could help communities to tackle these challenges. The second issue is, well, this is one of the strongest responses that Europe can provide about how it can work solving concrete problems, tackling concrete challenges. And the third one, this is also about cohesion. Those challenges pose cohesion challenges from the economic point of view, from the social point of view. And I think it's very important that we stress the importance of the cohesion policy to address those challenges. Not exactly about the question where the money comes from, but stressing that cohesion policy is the only way to have communities after these emergencies better prepared to face them than they were before the emergencies occurred. So, namely, the importance of cohesion is stressed every day in the way we react to these challenges.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think what you say there bears out the quote there that we also heard in the video. Emergency management shouldn't also become the new norm. You know, what the response should provide that additional resilience so that what comes next and other crises that undoubtedly one has to face, one is stronger every single time. I'm not leaving you out on purpose. I'm leaving you out in the interests of time management and formatting, but we are going to hear from you in just a moment. But thank you. I'm going to leave that, and we're going to now continue on our journey. So this year's edition, and we're going to put under the spotlight the first of these additional themes, and that theme is green transition. Now, over the summer, we've seen how climate-related disasters literally have ravaged forests and communities and damaged wildlife, biodiversity, the environment at large, and of course also displaced many people from their homes. And in fact, I experienced it twice myself in France in August, just as it happens. So it really was up close and very personal. And the extreme temperatures have also affected the health and well-being of Europeans. So there's no doubt, you all know it, the threat of natural disasters is on the increase and is being experienced firsthand by so many of us. Climate action is more urgent than ever. We have seen over the week how cities and regions have been right in the forefront of mitigating the consequences of climate change. So let's have a little bit of a reminder now.
The 20th anniversary of this landmark event, with thousands of people gathered together to participate to the biggest event on cohesion policy in Europe.
L'Europe se fera dans les crises et elle sera la somme des solutions qui leur seront apportées. Ces mots de Jean Monnet, père fondateur de l'Europe, résonnent aujourd'hui plus que jamais. La réponse individuelle des États n'est aujourd'hui plus suffisante. Ma génération réclame une action collective et rapide pour l'environnement.
We need a rapid reply for the environment. Today, certain politicians feel that we can have a climatically neutral Europe between 2050, but we have these different crises. These crises today have become a permanent situation now. They are a factor leading to destabilization of all regional policy.
Decarbonization of the economy while reaching energy independence.
The best way to combine emergency with structural is, in fact, when we make sure that you don't harm environment, but also that we don't harm cohesion when we invest.
Creating the conditions that after this emergency, we have a completely different landscape, more prepared to face other emergencies than the one we have today.
Thank you very much. So that was just a little teaser. I'm going to come to you now live. So we heard there from you, Yunus, we heard there, these climate crises, they're really a permanent feature. They are destabilizing for all of regional policy. Let me ask you to pick up on that and share some further thoughts.
Yes, first I could perhaps say, having seen your video, that it is the citizens themselves that are in advance, and they're showing us the way to go. Madam Commissioner, you referred to Poland and the feelings we shared there. And we were deeply impressed when we saw how Polish citizens opened their doors without waiting for any orders from the institutions. And the young people who are committed to the climate battle, they didn't wait for orders from the institutions before showing the example in their own lives. So it is our duty to act to deal with the climate and energy crises, which will completely change all our development policies. We've started to do that. We've started to do it through cohesion policy. And I can say that our policy is, without doubt, a policy which is the greenest of all European policies. We talk a lot about greening the CAP, and we're still waiting for that. Cohesion policy is a green policy because in the negotiations that we have undertaken together, we have introduced quite tough demands. We say that no investment may be allowed to harm the climate. This is why we have asked that at least 30% of investment provided through the ERDF should be directed towards these objectives, which will be beneficial to the climate and the environment. So we have taken a qualitative step forward. Secondly, the war in Ukraine shows us that both it is necessary for the planet, but above all, it is also necessary for geopolitical reasons, that we today free the European Union from its dependency on external bodies for energy. Energy is a key to development. And regional policy, I think, gains from providing a contribution to that.
And my last point, was I giving you googly eyes to make you scared that you had to die? Thank you very much for giving me a steer there. Indeed, so the war in Ukraine has indeed pushed the green transition even further up the agenda very firmly. I think there is a greater understanding of what's at stake now. We heard there Yunus talk about cohesion policy as a green policy. So I always like to be really concrete for audiences. Can you give us just a couple of examples of how specifically cohesion policy is supporting preparedness for fighting climate change and really nourishing that transition, particularly at the local and the regional level?
Of course, I think what Mr. Omarjee just mentioned is in itself very important because sometimes we don't realize that cohesion policy is probably the biggest investor, public investor, in energy saving, in renewable energy, and in fact, when the Commission started announcing this objective for the future of being green, we had not yet understood that energy could also become a weapon in the war. And so now, I mean, what we were anticipating is more important than ever. And I've been seeing a lot of investments. I mentioned it before because it's one of the recent visits I did in Romania, in which just by refitting the building of an old hospital, but that is serving more than 130,000 people, just by refitting and putting solar panels and putting heat pumps and doing the right recovery, the energy bill was saved by 30 to 40%. And this is something that is an example of how you can address it. If you allow me, I think, of course, we do emergency support, but the best use of the funds is in changing the way we produce, the way we move around, the way we use our buildings and also our transports, for instance. And yesterday, Mr. Vasco Cordeiro was in fact discussing this from this perspective. The long-term change is what really makes the difference forever. But of course, we have emergencies, so that's not the only issue. My last comment is in relation to our absolute need to go forward and to come from general ideas into concrete projects, into exchanging ideas. Yesterday, I was with a network of cities that are showing in practice what we can do with a city, with a big city or a small city, and having a vision how you can transform your use of electricity, having an objective and using the funds for this. Using the funds also in anticipation of what we know will happen. So with this massive investment, it's absolutely essential that you think forward, and then when you build, you protect the areas of flooding, not building on those areas, that you remanage or rebuild the forests, taking into account the risk of fire, and that you also have a preventive approach towards the future. This is doing no harm to environment and no harm to cohesion, of course.
You see, you read my mind, because I was about to say to you, could you please also just clarify that law? And you have done exactly that. So thank you very, very much. If I may, I'm going to push on, just in the interests of respecting these good people's time and the time of this closing session. We're going to move on now to our next theme. And of course, our next theme under the spotlight is digital transition. Now, I have to say this is, and it won't be a surprise, I think, to you, this is literally the red thread running through every single moderation I do, no matter the industry, no matter the sector, it has myriad moving parts. It's at the heart of the European Green Deal. We have these twin pillars. It's at the heart of all of these key points we're talking about: inclusion, fairness, jobs and skills. So an awful lot to think about. Before I turn to our two gentlemen, let's have a look what's been happening this week.
As a young elected politician, I believe that our cohesion policies should now more than ever, especially after the pandemic, prioritize digital innovation.
In Vienna, we want to spark girls' interest in robotics, in coding, and everything so on. If we want to shape a better future, a better society, if we want to combat climate change, we cannot miss out 50% of the population. We need all the ideas, we need all the potential of all the young boys and of all the young girls.
We must continue to invest in high-speed networks and 5G coverage across Europe.
All of these technologies are also highly carbon intensive. The recycling and the management of it is not following. If we have to talk about digitalization, we must mention as well these facts.
In environment and in climate, a lot of our technologies are ahead of the world because we want to make sure that these two aspects, green and digital, they have a sufficient important place. That has got to affect us from the way you consume, the way you move, the way you do your business, the way the administration works can really be completely improved, and the benefit for all of us is substantial.
Thank you very much. The benefit is substantial, and alongside that quote, we heard a lot of other interesting quotes, not least this call, to shape a better future and society and combat climate change. Goodness knows we need the gender balance in all of that. The importance of investing in infrastructure and really looking at what we're doing. It's a very carbon-intensive technology, so how are we managing all that? Let me turn to you first, if I may, Eunice. What would you like to bring to the table on this particular topic?
Well, first of all, I would like to say perhaps that the ERDF is an investment lever which is extremely powerful for innovation, digitalization. From 2014 to 2020, 20 billion euros were directed to this policy. That's considerable. And in particular, this has enabled us to form excellence centres throughout Europe, including in less developed areas in Europe. Imagine, it's through the cohesion policy and the ERDF that in regions, in the outermost regions, in the furthest away regions, you can have excellence centres, because our policy enables all regions to get ahead when it comes to the major challenges and not to end up behind. So the ERDF and regional policy are essential to these policies. And I think that for the community of researchers and startups, as well as the community of scientists, their role, the role that our cohesion policy plays is exceptional. And I think that in the future programming, 2021 to 2027, we will have even more funds available directed to these challenges. I'm talking about the development of the regions of tomorrow. And when it comes to the energy transition as well, and the digital transition. In these areas, we need to believe that it is the regions that are the real stakeholders. And that is why this week is incredible because it enables us to gather together here in Brussels all of this know-how, all of this expertise, all of these discussions as well. And they're essential so that we can continue to move forward.
Very nicely explained and comprehensive answer, and you used the words there, you know, we need to, this is a policy that's helping develop regions for tomorrow. And that kind of parity, we're talking about the most out-of-the-way places, is absolutely critical in terms of, and that's where the infrastructure comes into play, and accessibility. So again, just perhaps you could expand on how you see that relationship between cohesion policy and specifically the digital transition. Where does it really play a fundamentally efficient role?
Well, I think that the digital can be, or can be the new divide. There is this risk. Can be the new divide between regions, between areas of our territory. So cohesion policy, doing what it's doing to support digital transition, it's a way of bringing together and probably making a leap about how you can promote and make cohesion happen. Digital is the new area. That's an assumption that everybody does, and it's more than true. But the risk, at the same time, the risk is that you can have a new divide in this issue, but at the same time, the fact that the cohesion policy is already addressing it, make it a policy that I think can potentiate the way that regions are prepared for the future and are better involved in this process of cohesion. And may I stress one point, it's not only about infrastructures, it's not only about connectivity, it's about preparing people to use, preparing businesses to use the potential that digital transition has. And cohesion policy has to do with this.
Yeah, and a very good, absolutely, very, very valuable point that needs to be made. There is that risk that there won't be that parity, absolutely, and I think people are conscious of that as well. All the more reason to jump on it, make sure it doesn't happen, and for sure, and I know a lot of work is being done in the EU in terms of digital skills and jobs, but that is critical alongside the infrastructure and the connectivity. And we've all heard it so many times, the jobs of tomorrow, which is just around the corner, hey, they're going to be, and they are already very, very different. Thank you. So I'm now going to, just to bring a bit of vibe, I'm going to get off my seat again, just to prove that I can actually, move and I'm not being really lazy. We've heard how cohesion policy remains the EU's most important investment tool to help drive this fair, this green, this digital transition across Europe's regions and cities, and hopefully we've shed a little bit of light on how it has been providing that rapid and much needed support to member states during recent crises. If you asked a few people randomly kind of what they think cohesion policy's main goal is, I think they would say to ensure territorial cohesion across Europe. Who knows? I'm going to, in just a moment, invite a couple of my lovely special guests to share their thoughts, but let's have a look what's been going on during the week on this particular theme.
Mr. Lemaitre, imagine that you are in a school class full of 14-year-old students. How would you explain to them what is the main purpose of cohesion policy and cohesion funds?
Well, I would certainly start by saying that the European Union is a construct which can only stay together if animated by solidarity.
Much has been achieved in cohesion, but there are new challenges in the way we can deliver a better cohesion policy.
How would you define cohesion policy in one sentence?
It's very important that we do not fall in the trap of considering that cohesion policy is a policy just for some, because everywhere there are some kind of challenges that cohesion policy can help to address.
Commissioner, you are the responsible of Europe's cohesion and reforms. So basically you are its representative par excellence. Maybe can you share with us your views on how cohesion policy can be explained to the citizens?
Well, you are the communication experts. Probably you can give me some hints on how better to communicate it. What I can say is that cohesion policy is this glue that keeps Europe together.
The cost of no cohesion is the cost of no Europe.
I, as a member of the European Parliament, I rely on the leaders of the different regions in order for the very decisions that are needed to be taken as close to the citizens as possible.
Let's work together to be strong, to be present in a globalized world, and with happy citizens leaving no one behind.
This unity between the European institutions in these times of crisis is extremely valuable.
This discussion in follow-up of the 8th Cohesion Report and bearing in mind everything that we have been discussing here.
We are in the right track of history, fulfilling our founding fathers' dream about a Europe that is built and unite in diversity. And the way to do that is through cohesion policy.
So it genuinely elicits a lot of positive emotions. And in fact, I think you were being taught how to mime there in communicating by your lovely, lovely moderator. You defined it as the glue that keeps Europe together. How do you think the week addressed this theme? And would you say, yeah, perhaps it needs some better communication even so sometimes? Tell us.
No, I think what we need to do, all of us, because most people that are here, they are people that believe in the usefulness of this policy, in the essential nature of this policy. But outside these rooms, outside our network, probably we need to make an extra effort to show what concrete things have been done, what kind of problems have been solved. How a small village that where people were kind of forgotten got either internet, road, water, and managed to attract a company that creates jobs there and that triggers a development process there. Yeah. So I think what we have to do is actually to prove, to show what we mean by cohesion policy, because otherwise it's just an European policy. And we were discussing this in one of the panels, and someone was saying, yes, we need, what is cohesion policy? And then during the conversation, it was in this intergenerational kind of dialogue. He gave so many examples, and everything that had happened was a consequence of cohesion policy, from the company that changed the way of producing through introducing new technologies, also the improvement in the management of the public administration through the introduction of new computers and the training of people, the attraction of new companies. And of course, when we think of it, not in terms of a European policy, but in real life, I think we are showing that the taxpayers' money, when used in cohesion, it pays. It is a good use. It's for purpose. This solidarity, in fact, prevents Europe and regions from having, too much of a different future. Yeah. And so, if you don't see a vision for yourself, for your family, then you say, "Okay, I'm not part of this game, of this narrative, so I'm out." And this feeling of being in or being out, having the same chances, having a future, being capable of sharing our common destiny is in itself, I think, the core of the cohesion policy. That's how I see it.
I think it's beautifully explained, and I think it needs to be explained like that. Otherwise, as you rightly say, it's just a policy. What strikes me is it's a policy that's quite unique in pulling together all sorts of other policies. Actually, you gave some good examples there when you were saying, and then this, and then there's a green investment, and then there, and then somebody gets attracted into the area, and then there's this, and I think it's a very, very good example of how it fits together and how it's pulling together a lot of EU priorities. And I think the description does need to be very much in the way you make it, which is a much more emotional and meaningful description. How do these answers resonate with you, Mr. Omarjee. What would you like to add?
Yes, it is a unique policy, and first and foremost, it is a deeply European policy because when you travel, what you see is this, to other places, you see that this territorial cohesion doesn't exist. I'm thinking of a trip that we did to the United States, and we realized that in reality, there wasn't any real concern for cohesion. Same thing in China or in India. Well, in any case, not in the same way. So what that means is that the cohesion policy explains what the European project is. And the European project is to come together, to work together, to act in solidarity in a space of freedom and equality. And equality is a deep part of the European spirit and the different cultures and civilizations in Europe. And that is the objective, the final, the end game of our cohesion policy. And that is why it is a policy that has a huge amount of value. That is to say, we're not content with the fact that in the East there might be specific living conditions that are inferior to those of richer countries within Europe. So we don't tolerate the fact that in the outermost regions the conditions are inferior than at the heart of Europe. We want all European citizens to have the same rights and the same specific concrete rights, tangible rights. So this policy has very tangible objectives through a series of instruments, a series of policies, and has very specific objectives to improve the living conditions of European citizens in terms of the development of the territories and all territories, and the possibility for the European Union to advance, because territorial inequalities are detrimental to all countries at the end of the day, including those countries who have drawn the largest straw. So sooner or later, they will feel the consequences. So I think that it is a policy which is extremely important, that needs to be supported and will continue to be supported as long as we believe in the European project.
And its values. And I think what you encapsulated there in your explanation towards the end is you are only as strong as your weakest, your lightest, your most challenged link. So it is in everybody's interest to make sure that there is that parity and that cohesion and that solidarity. Can I move on to our last video now, please? Thank you very much. I didn't even wait for your okay, did I? I just got up, you see, I'm so rude. I like this one, though. This is something very close to my heart, even though I cannot consider myself necessarily a youth anymore. But youth empowerment. So I think you must have had your head in the sand if you don't know that this is, of course, European Year of Youth. So in that, it's really shining the light on young people as very critical and very energetic actors in building, well, all of this fair, this inclusive, this digital future. And sometimes I think we shouldn't have been using the words future because it's right here and right now. But before I invite comments from our guests, let's see what's been going on this week in terms of youth empowerment.
Pour que les jeunes aiment l'Europe.
For young people to like Europe, they need to learn about its history, how it works, but they also need to understand how it can be useful.
They're the ones that will have to live the consequences of these policies for the longest time.
Essentially, I was growing up in Hungary, in an industrial town of 80,000 people called Tatabánya.
I entered this room the first time as a representative of a national student union, a youth organization. And I remember thinking, my goodness, this is where a lot of things could be done.
Raise your hand, young elected politicians. Welcome.
I'm very, very happy to see so many young politicians in charge, because we need their energy, we need their vision. Our generation has done what we could. Some things we did right, some things we did wrong, but now it's up to them to bring forward. And of course, you've got to look very carefully at the situation of young people, at the situation of women, at the situation of elderly, and at the situation of children. Because children went through a very traumatic period, and when you have a poverty situation as a child, it will affect you throughout your whole life. The first winner from Georgia is Ani Arveladas.
Can you imagine one day wake up and you realize that you're not living in your country anymore? You know, you take your camera and Russian troops are near the so-called border, and they might think that you are having a gun and they might shoot you. And we had a couple of such cases. So yeah, it's kind of tough, but we do it, and we want everybody to know what the problem has, Georgia. Thank you.
And I think she beautifully encapsulated there, not just the energy, but the courage. And for me, the quote that really stands out in that is young people have to live the consequences of the policies. It's a very, very good quote. Now, I know that you did, obviously, and we saw it, had the opportunity to have some really good exchanges with some young citizens during the week. It was the Citizens Dialogue session that you participated in, and of course the award ceremony, Megalitsi Niedzielski Award Ceremony, which celebrates aspiring journalists that show a very strong attachment to the EU and its values. So how was that experience for you this week? What do you take away?
It is every year. It is a very important experience to see young people. Their life is starting their professional life is starting, and they already suffered so much. They already have shown so much courage, and they are so talented. Of course, if you look overall Europe, we are suffering from a very serious long-term demographic challenge, because we are becoming older. And also we are not giving the conditions for young couples, young people to settle down, to have children. On top of this, they have been traumatized and suffering from so many challenges these last years. You see, some people were starting their jobs, some people were in the middle of the university. For 2 years, they were having suffered from these COVID consequences. All the businesses refrained from hiring. They stopped working. They had to have lessons online. And then you have the war, and then you have the energy crisis, and then you have this human terrible situation. And we had several members of that were selected from these 6 selected journalists. Several of them had really personal drama for having to face a situation of war in Europe. So we need really to look after them, to protect them, because what for us is the 4 years in, 50 years of life or 60 years of life. For a lot of them, these 4 years represent 1/4 or one of their life, and probably the totality of their adult life. So really, I think it's very, very wise that we look after them, but that also we don't ask too much from them, and that we think what we can do for them, so that they really have a prosperous life, a normal life, that they are personally also feeling comfortable by living here in Europe, and not having to immigrate, to flee because of wars, to go away, or to suffer from too many dramatic consequences. So there is so much energy in them. Also, from a selfish point of view, we need young energy, young thinking, young ambition, and above everything, they are suffering from all this. But yes, they are the most happy people, smiling, singing, fighting for good causes, and when they take something in their hands, like environment or like gender business, oh, they really can do it, and we are all following them. So let's do it. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. And I would absolutely agree, and it's brilliant that you said that there is a lot of expectation. You know, all you hear, oh, young people are our future. Geez, they must just be like, oh, under the weight. So you are right to pinpoint that there has to be that support, and we have to hear their voices. So coming to you, I mean, perhaps you can just, well, you can say what you like, but maybe something around how the Committee of the Regions, you know, sees that dynamic, sees the role, the responsibilities, the engagement. What's your point of view?
Well, let me start by saying that sometimes is at cities and regions level, then more easily we can promote the participation of young people, because being levels of governance that sometimes have to take concrete decisions about concrete issues, well, sometimes are those decisions that cause reactions in favor or against or protest from everybody, but from young people too. Why is youth empowerment a new challenge for cohesion? Well, because it's a condition of the future of cohesion. It's a condition for the future of Europe. To have people involved, to have young people involved in the way Europe works, in the way that our democracy works. That is why that one of the projects that the Committee of the Regions has is exactly a EU Charter of Youth and Democracy. How we can promote that, what principles do we have, and what must we have to foster that participation. And sometimes, I think it's important also to be aware of that. Sometimes local politicians tend to expect that young people come to them to participate, where sometimes we have to dismantle the structures of participation and create new ones. Yeah, so us doing the opposite way, going to young people and trying to see in which way do they want to participate, in which way do they want to have a say about their communities, about their future, about our lives.
I think it's, again, an excellent point, and I'm sure it's a point that many young people in the room would absolutely... Does that resonate with those of you who are under 17? No, I know that's not young people, but does that resonate, that you know, it's not all about you having to come to those kind of incumbent political structures, but there is another way of creating that dialogue. Raise your hand if that resonates for you, because it certainly does for me. And I think that's absolutely critical. But as you rightly say, that support is a condition for the future and the future of this particular policy. So thank you very much. I'm shortly going to bring this session to a close. I don't want to do that without giving each of you just a moment to share some final words, something perhaps you didn't get to say, something you would like to give these good people as a takeaway, or maybe something that really struck you, that you take away from this week. So I will stay with you, Mr. Cordeiro. Anything, what would you like to share in these last moments?
Well, first of all, a big word of thank you to the European Commission, of course, to the European Parliament, to everybody that was involved in organizing this European Week of Regions and Cities. The second is, when you have an initiative that can bring together around 20,000 participants, 500 partners, well, that means something. We must have struck the chord anywhere that makes people want to participate. And so it's the idea of, I think, cohesion, of being together in this rough sea, in these rough times, but believing that the way we can reach a safe haven, a safe harbor, is together, leaving no one behind, either a region, a city, or an individual. And this idea is, I think, an idea that resonates, that comes from the very idea of the European project, of the European Union. So we must continue with this effort, and especially taking a word from Commissioner Ferreira that we need to go out. We need to reach out to those who still have doubts about cohesion policy or the cohesion as a value. We must resist the temptation to only preach to the converted. We need to go out. Who needs to be convinced about the importance of cohesion is the ones that they're not here. They're outside. And it is our role to go outside and to demonstrate that it worth the fight for cohesion, the fight for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you all need to go out there with that degree of passion. I think that is absolutely what's going to sell it. But it's absolutely critical, and as the Commissioner has already provided several times, also concrete examples, whether it's talking about the retrofitting of the hospital in Romania, or the examples that you brought to our MEP, talking about those really far-flung regions. That is important to tell those stories, because for me, stories are facts with heart in them. Last couple of words from you, please. Mr. Omarjee.
First of all, I would like to thank the Committee of the Regions for this extraordinary organization, and to really welcome the joint efforts between the institutions, the Parliament, the Council, the Commission, in these times of crisis. I think that this coming together is extremely valuable and critical. The second thing, I think that we need to constantly remember that the European policies need to be used on the basis of certain values, European values, because they are under threat in many countries. And so we need to continue, all of us, to fight for these values. We need to continue to work for the right of law, and all of us need to continue to win over hearts and minds, so that nationalism, which today is resurging, sadly, throughout the world and in Europe too. We don't want that to triumph, because if nationalize wins in the hearts and minds of young Europeans, then the European project is finished too. And the cohesion policy is one which, by promoting it, can bring down these nationalist ideas. And I think that in reality, by promoting our policies, by getting involved in cohesion policies, that I think that we are participating in a much bigger vision than just the cohesion policy. It's one that is bigger than all of us. And so I think that we absolutely need to trust in the future of the cohesion policy and in the future of the European project. Thank you.
To use two words, well said. Voilà. Let me come to you, please, Commissioner. Perhaps what are the next steps for cohesion policy? There's a lot we hear. Perhaps what can we expect this time, next year, in the future? Let me pass the last words to you.
Well, thank you very much. And speaking after the final comments of my two very dear friends, I can only underline this feeling of gratitude that they already expressed. I want to express it in relation to both of them personally, to the institutions they represent, to everybody that was engaged, and allow me to our staff from all the institutions that made this event possible. Thank you to all of them. This is a massive organization, but I think it was adequate to commemorate the 20th celebration. So I think it was done at the right level, and the engagement that allowed us to go to the details, to the real life of people, to the regions, to the municipalities, and see how things are going. The criticism, the suggestion, the engagement is in itself a massive wealth. Throughout this week, I have heard calls for cohesion to remain close to its core objectives, and this is also my belief, my commitment, but I also have heard, and all of us have heard, appeals for cohesion to remain flexible, to be ready to act, and after what we have already done, to also address the present situation with extremely high energy prices, feeding inflation, threatening economic recovery, threatening companies, and creating a lot of stress in the families all over Europe, because this is something absolutely unexpected, but very dramatic and very strong. So we heard these appeals. These appeals came from member states, from the Committee of the Region, but in particular from the European Parliament. Yeah. The European Parliament was really very vocal in this alert. And in fact, as usual, we are trying to act, to react, and therefore the Commission, you asked me what is happening now, what is the follow-up, the immediate follow-up. Will be that Commission will be proposing, in fact, to the co-legislators, so Council and the Parliament, for yet a new set of exceptional measures, building on the flexibilities more or less similar to what we did for COVID reaction during the pandemic, or the flexibilities that we created for care, for the refugees. Yeah. This means concretely that again we'll be using what is still left, less and less, but there is still enough left in the 2014-2020 funds. We still we'll have to put a limit to this transfer of funds. But in fact, we will propose to support working capital for small companies, some support for companies, for them to be able to keep the jobs going on, and also to families that need some support to income, of course, managed through the usual funds, so the regional fund, the social fund, and the cohesion fund. But in fact, we don't want the policy to be redirected to emergency situations. We have discussed it thoroughly, and we'll be controlling or limiting this to the emergency profile of 2014-2020. So it will be exactly today and tomorrow that we'll be officially proposing it. We'll be forwarding it to Council and to Parliament in the coming days. And of course, we hope that yet again we'll make this gesture and that we can help the business and people to keep afloat and to overcome yet this crisis. But going to the more long-term, the more typical cohesion policy, I would like to suggest two aspects for homework, so to speak, to everybody. One basic message, already my two fellow speakers addressed it. I mean, I'm not very much in favor of proselytism, but at least make sure that people understand and know what is happening and what we are doing all together. But then the two messages is, okay, let's start preparing projects and deliver the funds that we have available for 2027. We had too many things happening and disturbing us, and but the core of the long-term convergence has got to be taken on board and prepared with sound projects, ready, a pipeline of projects. And secondly, let us engage, all of us, together with the Cohesion Alliance, with all the institutions, in how we can improve a policy that is clearly a performant policy, but like in any other things in life, we can always improve if we have the will to reach our targets. So how can we improve the policy? The debate will be open throughout the year 2023, so we count on your suggestions, we count on you, and together we'll make Europe more cohesive, which means giving similar chances, they are never equal, across Europe to all citizens, wherever they were born, wherever they want to live, and ignoring no region, no citizen, leaving, in fact, no one behind. Thank you very much, and let's go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. That, dear speakers, that, dear audience, is absolutely a wrap. Can I just say again, hugely warm thanks to these lovely, lovely guest speakers, our EU Commissioner, our President of the European Committee of the Regions, and our MEP. So please, another warm round of applause for coming here to share the stage. That's my job as a moderator. Just a few words of judicious thanks, of course, to the European Commission, DG Regio, and the Committee of the Regions for organising and hosting the week, together with some very, very talented support from Teamwork, from ManyThink, from the technical crews here, from, of course, the brilliant interpreters. I mean, that is beautiful. And I think you said it's the 20th anniversary and you really wanted to make it special, but a lot of work goes into making this all happen seamlessly. So thanks to all of the speakers who took the time and the trouble to share but a fraction, I'm sure, of their considerable brains. And of course, thank you very, very much to you for choosing this event and for actually turning up and tuning in. We are really, really grateful. Who goes away, even if it's just a nugget, better informed, more enthused, more knowledgeable, more motivated? Raise your hand. Very good. Well, there we go. On a bossy note, you are the multipliers. We need to get beyond the echo chamber, do we not? This is what we said. So please tell those stories, whether it's through Twitter, hashtag EURegionsWeek or other. I can promise you I do it. You've probably gathered. I really annoy taxi drivers, people who sit next to me in random cafes. I do sort of try and break the EU down into its constituent parts to make it meaningful. And I have lots of conversations like that, but maybe I feel guilty because I'm a Brit. So it might be part of my job. But you are the best multipliers. So please do that. And on that note, we really do wish you a very, very good rest of the day, and we hope we will see them next year at the European Week of Regions and Cities. So thank you very much to you all and to all of you at home. Have a very good day.